the WorkJoy Jam podcast. I'm your host, Beth Stallwood, and today I'm going to have a wonderful chat with Donna Reeves, who's an internal communications and engagement expert. And I think the subject of internal comms is one that often comes up on either the things that make me gloomy if they're not done well, or the things that help me really stay connected to the organisation if they are done well. And in our chat, we talk about things like the role of the manager and how challenging that can be, and how to really consider things like the purposefulness of your communications, who you're communicating to, and almost thinking a little bit like an internal marketing firm or advisory service. And I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome to the WorkJoy Jam. I'm very excited today to be joined by Donna Reeves. And rather than me introducing Donna, I'm going to let her introduce herself. And I'm just going to ask her a very Cilla Black type question. And if you're too young to remember that, you don't need to worry about it. Who are you? What do you do? Where do you come from? Tell us a bit about you.
Well, it's lovely to be here, Beth. Thank you for inviting me. And I am old enough to remember Cilla Black. So my name's Donna Reeves. I have worked in internal communication and engagement for longer than I can remember, 20 plus years. So my most recent role was in the luxury department store Fenwick. And prior to that, I worked for Kingfisher, the group that owns B&Q and Screwfix in the UK, and other businesses across, I think, 8 or 9 different countries now.
Amazing. And I am really interested to dig into things like internal comms and engagement, because so often when we think about WorkJoy, or I think about the other end of it, which I call work gloom, things like poor communication and not knowing what's going on around in the business, all of those things come up as sources of things that don't make people very happy and that cause some trouble in businesses. And I'd love to go in and talk about this stuff around internal comms and some of the challenges of it, and also thinking about, as individuals, what can we do? So when it comes to WorkJoy, we're all about like personal responsibility. What can you take? What can you do for yourself to keep yourself up to date? So tell me a little bit about you and let's start with your beliefs and thinking around internal comms in organizations, because those are big organizations, right? There's a lot of people involved in them.
Yeah, great question. I think internal comms has in my view, companies almost shouldn't need internal comms, because they'd have great managers who will be communicating every day with their team, and you don't need a central function to tell them how to do that. So if a communications function is great at its job, ultimately it should sort of almost do itself out of a job.
Yeah.
I think the reality is we're a long, long way from that happening. And I think there's a multiple reasons why that is. So I think that from all the engagement surveys and things that I've been part of over the years, one of the number one thing that comes back is communication. They don't get enough communication. And when you dig into what is it exactly, because I always take that very personally. Obviously,
like, that's my job.
That's my job. And I feel very responsible for that. But when you dig into what they mean, it's often at a very local level from their manager. It's often that tactical information that they're looking for about, particularly in the worlds that I've worked in, which has been predominantly retail. It's what's the focus for this week? What's the focus for today? What should we be making sure happens in our store or in our area this week? And it's that very local communication that is often missing, or not as often or frequent as people would like.
Yeah.
When you talk to them about understanding of what the company is trying to do, often they're a bit more comfortable that they have that information. How they translate that into or what does that mean for me, is, I think, one of the challenges. It's a manager challenge and also a communication challenge.
Mm.
I often use an example of, Maureen on the till, and thinking about, so if we're communicating with Maureen on the till, she comes in every day, she, her time is spent sat on at a cash desk, and she doesn't have a lot of time to read things. She's not sat in front of a computer. She, on her breaks, which will be short and sharp, she wants to relax. She wants a cup of tea. She wants to perhaps check her phone or check in with her family. How are we going to get her attention? And if we're going to get her attention, we better be sure that the information that we're giving, the communication, is really relevant for Maureen.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a complete waste of everyone's time.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Is that understanding that not everyone in your organization is sat at a computer waiting to read an email from you. They're in different situations. People have different types of job, different types of communication preferences,
Yeah.
different ways of learning. There's so many things to take in. And that, I imagine, when you're sat there thinking about how do we communicate to a big organization, that's quite a complicated factor to consider, right?
It is. And also, if you are sat at a computer, we all know the joy of hundreds of emails every day coming
Yeah.
into our inbox. So whilst it's in theory easier to get a message to somebody who's sat in front of a computer because you feel you have a captive audience, they've got so much noise, so many emails, messages, and now we've got all sorts of other technology with Teams and WhatsApp groups and all of those great things which all have a role. But getting through that, cutting through that, and getting a message to somebody who's sat in front of a computer is a different challenge. And I
Yes.
think that's one of the important challenges for internal communication teams, is making sure you've got the right breadth of channels so that you
Yeah.
can get to people, and that you're making sure your messages are really, really relevant and targeted for that audience, just as you would if you were in a marketing function with your customer segments, looking at how different customers need to receive information and marketing from you.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one, isn't it? It's almost like thinking like an internal marketeer to be able to consider who you've got, what's the right message, what's the right level of message, what do people need to know. And I
Yep,
always think in like the modern day world versus however many years ago, when we started doing this kind of work, is we're not short of channels or technology anymore. We're not short of those things, but we're short of people's time and attention for those things.
absolutely. And also, having a myriad of channels doesn't necessarily help give clarity.
Yeah.
If people don't know where to, I think that's one of the really important things that an internal comms function can do, is be really clear on what channel is for what use, and where you can find out if you're looking for, I don't know, HR type information, you will find that here. We'll only ever communicate that through this channel. If you're looking for a business update or strategic update, this is where we will definitely put that. Crisis comms, anything you absolutely need to know will come this way. I think that's important. You can't use every channel for or keep mixing them up, because people
Mm.
don't know where to go, and given the time constraints and the attention spans, because we're all under huge amounts of pressure and being bombarded with messages all the time, you have to get that really clear. An example would be, at the start of the pandemic, in Fenwick, we were very, very clear that Yammer, which was our internal network, would be the place for news. It
Yeah.
would be the place we would always post first, and they would get the most up-to-date information about guidance, or our stores shutting or opening, or where they could travel to, or how we would treat their pay, or any of those things. That's where it will be.
And having that like real clarity for people is like, this is where you need to go for this type of information, rather than letting people try and work that out and get confused by it.
Yes, it's really important. And I think, coming back to your point about that sort of personal engagement, I think there is an onus on individuals to find out, to go and find information. But internal comms teams need to make that very clear, where they can go,
Yeah.
where they'll find this information versus that information. But then the onus is on the individuals. If we go back to Maureen, if she's only got a 15-minute tea break and she just wants to sit and you know read the paper, or then that's fine. But if she has a query about her pay, or wants to check what the latest situation is on holiday bookings, or on so on, then she knows exactly where to go in that 15-minute break that she's got.
Mm. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? And also, I sit here and I think about it, is that it's not really rocket science, is it? This is actually some really good planning and thinking. But actually, it might not be rocket science, but it's not easy to make it happen either. There is a lot of complexity involved when it comes to people, and people have so many different ways of wanting information. Some people are like always connected, some people don't connect very often with what's going on in the organization. And actually, being able to get consistent messages out there is really hard as well.
Yes, it is. And that's where the comms team needs to be really clear on what the strategy is, and the channel strategy, and share that with the right groups of people, and then be consistent about how they use it. So if this is the channel that we always use for business updates, then this is the channel that we always use. And you can be flagging on other channels that the business update has just been posted, but it's always in the same place.
Yeah, it's not like it disappears and goes to other
No.
places.
And then if I'm busy, or I'm out seeing a client, or I'm out on the shop floor, or I'm on a factory floor, I may not be able to look at that at the moment it's posted, but I know where it will be.
Yeah. And then when I have the time, I can go and look at it, and when I need it, kind of that. And there must be a difference as well. I'm just like in my head going between the on-demand information that people need at some point in time when it's right for them, and then the other side of it, which is the stuff we need to tell people because it's important for them to know about. So there's kind of that push-pull factor almost between different types of comms.
And there's also, coming back to Maureen, I use as my example quite often, is why does she need to know? So I'm all for sharing and all for transparency, and I think most people want to connect to a purpose of the organisation and feel that they're adding value and contributing to that, and that's great. So I think we always need to think about that. There are some people who come to work who just want to come in, do their job well, and then leave at the end of the day. They don't feel they need to connect to some greater purpose. They just want to do their job and leave at the end of the day and get their get their pay packet at the end of the month or the end of the week, and that's also fine. So I think we always have to question, why are we doing this? Why does Maureen need to know this? Does she need to know this today? Or is this something that we just need to make available and make sure everyone's clear on where it is? So if Maureen is one of those individuals who really wants to connect to the overall purpose of the organisation, and she's passionate about that, she knows where she can get her updates.
Yeah, but not forcing every single bit of information on everyone, because that must be like the curation of what messages go out there and what information goes out there must be, you must have to do that really carefully, because you're right, not everyone needs to know absolutely everything.
Yeah, it is, and that is the constant battle, because everybody thinks their thing is the most important thing. We've got this new shiny thing and we want to share it with everyone because we're super proud of it and we think it'll be really helpful. And of course you want to help people that are really proud and want to share, because you'll get other functions who are less keen to share what they're doing. Or you could work in a business which is actually not great at communicating and keeps everything very close to its chest. So it's a great problem to have, that everybody wants to communicate and has lots of really interesting projects and things to share. But it's finding the right way to share them. Is it a need and absolutely critical that all our colleagues know this today? Is it something that could go in some kind of newsletter, or however you do that, digitally or paper in some places? Or is it a poster, or is it something that goes on the intranet with a little update? There's so many ways you can do things, but is it absolutely critical today, as opposed to we've got a new CEO joining us, and that's quite an important piece of information for most people. Would be interested in who's running the business and where they've come from and who they are, and we don't want to push that out at 6 p.m. in the evening when most people are not going to read it. So there's ways of working, and I think just establishing those in a business is a sort of first step.
Yeah, so you're thinking about, what is the content? What's the right way to share it? Which channel do we use? Even things down to like, what's the timing of that? As you said just then, like, you don't want to be sending this out late at night if people are going to be not taking notice. So there's a whole different factor involved as well, which is timing. And,
people try to do that when they want to hide. When they want to hide something, they often do that. It's like, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, it's the whole, if we don't want people to really engage with this particular bit, we'll just like pop it out late and no one will notice.
Exactly.
So lots of different factors involved here, and being able to have clarity around that. If you are somebody right now listening to this who works in internal comms or has internal comms as part of their responsibility, so I'm going to come into a moment about managers, because actually a lot of people have an internal comms role which wouldn't have internal comms in their job title, but it is part of their job.
Yeah,
these are things to think about. And actually, even if you don't have this from your whole organizational level, if you're thinking about, if you're a manager and you're in your team, these are things that you could take and do and think about. Okay, so what's the content I'm sharing? When am I sharing it? Who am I sharing it with? What way am I sharing it? On a more micro local level than just thinking about an entire organization. Those points and those recommendations work at all the different levels, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that I've often done in businesses where communication and engagement hasn't been as mature a process as it could be, is share that Simon Sinek YouTube video of Start with the Why.
Yeah,
I think that's a great place to start and think about why we're communicating, why this message is important, and also this thing, this thing that we're going to do. Why are we doing it? Why are we restructuring? Why are we shutting this area of our business? Or why are we merging those two functions? Why are we doing it? It's not just the what. We have to start with the why, as Simon Sinek would say. And I think that's super important. So if you're for a manager who's just doing a small huddle on a Monday morning to update the team on priorities for the week, why are these things our priorities? What's driving that is helpful, because then people are not just doing a task without understanding why we're doing it.
Yeah. So the context and the background,
so
and the
important.
reasoning. more important somehow than the what, I think, when you're in that zone.
Well, if you want people to be empowered to do the right thing, which lots of businesses talk about, they want people to use their initiative. They want them to feel that they can, take the right action with a customer in front of them, if they're in a retail environment. Then you have to give them the context. So if you set the context really clearly for them, then it's easy for them to know what the right thing to do is in that environment, rather than having to go and ask somebody. If you constantly just give them tasks without context, then it's unsurprising that they will, if something happens outside of that task, they don't know what to do.
Yeah. And that whole, it comes up a lot, doesn't it? Empowering people. Organizations want people to take initiative. They want innovation. They want better ways of doing things. But to enable that, you have to give people the understanding of the framework in which they're working. What is the goal? Why is that the goal? What's important around that? What are the behaviors that are okay around that? What are the values that we hold dear in this organization, so that people can act in a way that makes sense in their role, and that makes sense for their customers, and that makes sense for the people around them.
Yes, exactly. If you don't give them the context and you just constantly give them a task or a small piece of the puzzle, then it's unsurprising that they can't take the initiative and go above and beyond, because they don't have enough information about what we're trying to do as an organization or a team or a division or whatever it is. It's so important to give that context, to start with the big picture and then break it down into the small chunks. So our vision or our strategy, or however you describe what the focus is for the team in your business, and then say, right, and that's our North Star, that's where we're heading. And so this week we are focusing on X. So anything we can do to drive X is really important. And here are some things that I thought we would start with, and then you've got task focused. But at least people understand that bigger picture.
Yeah. And it's so important, but it's also something that we often forget to do. We kind of get, because, and I think this is one of the challenges of organizations and how things work, is that we're often people are measured on what they do. So they're measured on the numbers of how much you sold, or what you've done here, or how many calls you took today, or there's a million different ways to measure the what. So the what seems to be the focus of the attention, but actually, to do the what better, there's a few steps before you actually get into it, that is so easy to forget.
Yes. And I mean, if you're on a call center and you're focusing on calls answered, I mean, yes, that may be a useful metric to understand whether you've got the right resourcing and whether you're handling enough, and how many complaints you're receiving and so on. So it's a useful metric, of course, but the quality of the conversations that go on in those calls, and whether those customer service agents are able to really support customers and deal with things at that first level, as opposed to it being escalated or the customer coming back 4 times, that's a better metric, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Harder to measure, but definitely a better way of thinking about things. And actually, if you want to get better metrics, maybe stopping focusing on the what and focusing on the why might actually help you achieve better things, because it helps people connect with what's the reason, and why am I here, and what am I doing, and how do I do this really well. I have a question for you, and you brought it up earlier, like right at the beginning, and I think it's a really interesting one for us to dig into if you're up for it. And this is about the role of managers in terms of internal comms. And I love the vision would be, and I totally believe in this vision, because I probably believe in the same thing for kind of HR teams, is that you don't really need them because everyone's really good at doing the manager stuff. I don't think we're there yet. I agree with you. In terms of managers, obviously most managers I know are slightly overwhelmed.
Yeah.
They have they often have a day job to do, and management is part of their day job. They have things coming at them from all different angles, from colleagues or partners or clients. They have their team to look after. They have things that their managers want them to do. Management is a challenging role. And when you add things like internal comms into that, which is obviously a really important part, I'm not surprised that managers don't always get the internal comms bit right when they have so many things to do.
Yeah, agreed.
And I stopped talking because I couldn't breathe anymore because I lost all of my breath. But I think that the challenges here is, how do we make, and I'm sure you've got some tips for this, how do we make it easier for managers to be good at doing the comm stuff, so it doesn't feel so overwhelming and like another thing added onto a very long to-do list?
So I have a couple of views on managers. I agree with you completely. I think they're invariably overwhelmed. They have so much on their plate, and it feels like it can feel like this is another thing to do. I think I read many years ago one of the Gallup books about managers, and there was this story that's always stuck with me, and I often use it as an example, which is, we often promote people to be a manager of people because they are technically very good at what they do.
Yeah.
So one of the stories in the Gallup book was about an engineer who was an exceptional engineer and took the whatever it is that they were making apart and could put it back together and drive efficiencies, and he was brilliant. And so, to recognise how brilliant he was, they made him the engineering manager, at which point he never got his hands on any kind of piece of product again, because his role was elevated from that. He's two steps removed from the thing that he loved and was brilliant at, and made him the manager of the team without any training, without any support. It's just almost it was recognition of his brilliance at being an engineer. And now he's no longer really an engineer, whilst he has obviously that knowledge. It's how do we help managers to be a great manager? Because it's a huge job, it's a huge responsibility, and it comes with lots of responsibility. You're managing other people, you're responsible for their careers, their feedback, their a level of engagement. Whilst I absolutely believe, as I know you do, that we all have to be responsible for our personal engagement, your manager, you join a business, but you often leave a manager. It has such a big, profound effect on your daily working life. So I think it's about helping the managers, when they first become a manager, to really understand what that means.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I would say. I then think, if managers could understand that if they communicated and engaged their teams more, that would actually take the pressure off of them. But actually, it seems like a huge task to do on top of what you're already doing. But actually, if you could do more of it and empower your team to do more, you'd become more that conductor of the orchestra. And if you think about the conductor of an orchestra, they're the only one not playing an instrument. You're there, raised slightly above, and you're looking over, and you're seeing the violins, and you're thinking, oh, someone needs a little bit of help over there, so I'm going to spend a little time over there to help that there. Or I'm going to look over here at the brass section. Oh, somebody over there needs a little more encouragement and a little help, so I'm going to look over there. It's that, I think, if you can give more to your team, you will get it back. It will actually help you.
Yeah, it's like the upfront investment, isn't it? It's like it's going to take a bit of investment of my time and effort and energy here to be able to engage people well. but that investment will be worth it because the payoff will be better, because people will be more engaged, more able to take
Yeah.
on responsibility, more able to do their jobs really well. um, and yeah, it's really interesting talking about the conductor of the orchestra. One of the things I often say is that the conductor's job is in the rehearsal, and by the time you get to performance, that actually it's the rest of the team that are doing the job, because their job there is to help people develop and help people be great at their jobs and
Mm.
help people to perform really well and help people when they're having challenges.
Yeah.
And that all happens as you're working through it. And then when you're in the kind of performing zone, when you've got a high performing team, you're there, as you say, just checking in on things. You're there, making sure that everyone's in a good place. And I think, talking about managers as well, in the time that we're in right now, in the last 2 years, I think managers' roles have become probably even more challenging, because when you're managing a hybrid team, which is what a lot of people are doing now, where some people are in the office, some people are working from home. If you're managing people who are struggling with things like mental health issues, which we know a lot of people have, you're struggling with things like burnout and, working from home fatigue and all of the challenges over the last few years, I think has a lot of pressure, even more pressure on managers. And those things I do think make internal comms a bit more complicated again. Like, it adds another layer to it.
Yeah, it definitely does. Um, and I think it's equipping and helping and supporting managers.
Yeah.
It is should be something that, as a business, as an HR function, as a L&D function, a lot of energy should be put into supporting managers with all of those things that you've talked about, which I could absolutely agree with. The dynamic of hybrid working, of people's challenges, dealing with whether some people have been very nervous to come back to work. Some people can't wait to get back to the office. There's a whole, so many different scenarios that as a manager you're dealing with, as well as being managed yourself by targets and what you need to achieve and so on. But as we all know, we'll do achieve all of those things through your team.
Yeah.
I know there's no I in team. It is one of those things that you will only get the job done with your team. And I love talking about leadership, as I know you do, but you can be a leader by your sort of seniority, and that's one definition of the word. But actually, if nobody wants to follow you, then you're really not a leader,
Yeah.
because it's about the followership. It's about having people who know that you've got their back, and you're you're challenging them. Some of the best bosses I've had, the best boss I've ever had, was incredibly challenging of me. In fact, I really didn't like him initially.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows that. I love him. I love him now. And we're still in touch. And he's someone I would still pick up the phone to if I needed some advice. But he pushed all my buttons when I first started working for him. And but we had lots of great conversations, and he had this wonderful way of giving me a hug and giving me a slap all at the same time, metaphorically.
A bit of tough love.
A bit of tough love, but also support.
Yeah.
So I knew he had my back, but he would also push me, and he was pushing me with intent, with positive intent,
Yeah.
because he knew I had it in me, because he knew I could do it. And I think that's really important. Your team will run through walls for you if they know you've got their back, and that you're their biggest supporter, their cheerleader. You'll give them feedback, tough love, as well as the nurturing arm around the shoulder when they need it.
Yeah. And that for me is around one really clear thing, and that's about understanding and knowing your team really well.
Yeah.
Like, as people, as human beings, not just as people who deliver a task. It's saying, I know who Donna is. I know how to develop her. I know how to push her. I know when I have gone too far and I need to give her a bit of a hug. But you don't get that from not spending time understanding and getting to know your people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you have to spend the time, and that can be, through all the things that we all know about. So one-to-ones, time together, lunches, team days, social gatherings. It's all of that stuff, all that good stuff. It's building relationships, building rapport. Doing strengths. Understanding people's strengths and where people struggle. And I'm a great believer in putting all the emphasis on building the strengths rather than trying to strengthen weaknesses. But I think you have to mitigate those weaknesses. So if somebody is less strong in an area, one of the other members of the team hopefully balances that out. That's about building a great team of people that work really well together. But I think you're right. You only work that out by spending time with them.
Yeah, and that time is precious, right? And it's about where are you going to invest that time. And I get it, because it's a similar thing to when you talk about coaching people rather than telling them what to do. It takes longer in the beginning part, but it doesn't take longer in the end part. You invest the time up front in getting to know people. You invest the time in coaching people. You invest the time in helping people, whichever version of this stuff is. If you invest that time up front, the rest of it happens more easily. It happens with more efficiency. It happens with more effectiveness. It happens with more engagement if you make the effort to make that time happen. And I also think with investing time is you'd be amazed what a regular 10-minute conversation can do versus having to have a whole day with somebody or having to have hours and hours and hours of conversations. I think sometimes we overestimate the time is needed and therefore we don't do it versus having regular little bits of time with people.
Yeah, and it's also being a human being. I think I've seen in different businesses when people are, particularly when people are early in their managerial careers, sometimes they sort of feel they need to exert, that sort of, I need to show you that I am now a manager. I need to show you that I have more power. Sometimes people react, don't they, in that way, that they need to feel they need to step up, because that's probably the language that's been used. We no need to see you step up. And they sort of behave oddly because they're sort of feeling like they need to show everybody who's boss around here. Of course, that's the worst possible thing you could do. You do, of course, need to do things, to do some things differently, but you don't need to become a different person. Because actually, if people know that you're a good person, someone who cares about them, cares about their work, cares about them personally, people will, the fact that you're now the manager, yes, sometimes there's a shifting dynamic. If you've been, one of the team, one of the boys and girls, and all of a sudden, they feel they can't socialize with you or tell you something because you're suddenly their manager. Yes, that's a shift, but you've not changed fundamentally. You're still the same person, and people just need to know that you're still the same person. You're a good person. You're here to do good work, and you've got their back.
Yeah, and that buddy to boss or mate to manager situation is a hard one to manage if you're in that zone, but you can make it happen. And it's again, it's not about suddenly becoming a totally different human being. It's about remembering who you are and being the best version of that in a new context and with new responsibilities, and taking that seriously. I always think take the job seriously, but not yourself too seriously, and that way you'll probably be in a good position.
I agree. I mean, I do think there are many leaders, managers who take themselves very seriously. I've never really been someone like that. I've always enjoyed spending time with people at all levels in the organisation, and felt that was hugely valuable to me. I think it is for everybody. I think it's particularly valuable for internal comms professionals. I think the best internal comms people are not at their desk.
Yeah.
They're out, they're talking to people, they're walking around, they're chatting, they're in the canteen, or they're on the shop floor. They're talking to people, they're hearing what's going on, how people are feeling, what's word on the street. It's all of that stuff. It's really, really important.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great point. Is whether you are an internal comms professional, or you are a manager, or you have a role which has some of this stuff within it that you need to do, is you're not there to be a loudspeaker for something. You're there to actually listen and to understand and to know what's going on, so that when you do communicate, you're doing it in a way that makes sense to people, and
Yeah.
what the challenges are, and where people are struggling. So that connection with the human being versus the I need to just tell people a message is where it becomes more meaningful.
Yeah, and it's also one of the areas that internal comms can really add value, because when someone comes to, a senior person comes to you and says, this is the I'd like to get a message out, I'd like to do a little update, I'd like to say something like this, and you, well, no, that's not going to land well. But let me share with you why I think that's not the right thing to do. If you're not close to what's going on in the business, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't be that. They often use the word trusted advisor in internal comms, because you should be able to, for your senior team, for your chief exec, or your senior executives, be able to advise them on the right thing, the right course of action from a comms perspective, because not just from a comms professional perspective about the way to get a message or the way to craft a message, but the business, and what word on the street is and how people are feeling.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I honestly, we could talk forever about these different things, because I'm sure there's a million and one different things we could recommend for people. But what I'm going to do now, if it's okay with you, I'm going to move you on to some quick fire questions. Are you ready?
Okay, I am braced.
You don't need to be nervous about this. They're not difficult questions.
Okay.
First question. This is a personal one for you. So we've obviously talked about the importance of internal comms, getting the joy or feeling the other side of it. But for you, what is always guaranteed to bring you a little bit of work joy?
Being with colleagues.
Yeah.
Being out, I think particularly in my retail experience, being with colleagues in stores has brought me the most joy. Being out and about, chatting to them, seeing the huge enthusiasm for doing the jobs that they do, and that always brings me a lot of joy.
Love that. And also helps you do your job really well. So it has like a double whammy.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, indeed.
Question 2. What book are you currently reading?
I am reading, oh my goodness. I can't remember I can't remember it, but I come back to me.
I'll come
hold that thought, caller. I will come back to you on a second.
Should I ask you a different question? Because when you ask a different question, sometimes the answer to the question before pops back in to your mind.
Oh, it's sat on my bedside table. I can go and get it in a second if that would help.
If you can't remember that one, maybe what's a really good book you would recommend people to read?
So I read the Vanishing Half recently, which was exceptional. I'm loving currently. I don't know if anyone else watches it, but the Between the Covers, the book show on BBC Two.
Ooh.
It's called Between the Covers, and it has 4 or 5 well-known individuals who bring a book that they absolutely love and would highly recommend, and then they talk through 2 or 3 new books that have just been released. And it's where I get often I'm on, I have a little list So I watch that program and then I write down, actually, let's go to my little notes section because that might give me where's my book list.
Oh, I've not heard of that one. I'm going to have to give that a watch because I love a good book recommendation. Love it. Between the Sheets, BBC Two, right? I've noted that down for myself.
Yeah, I've got a few things in my pile. So I've got Abby Morgan's book, which is I think personal to. It's a story. It's about her life, and she's the writer of The Split, which
Okay, yeah.
TV drama. That's next on my list, and Nobody Will Tell You This But Me is another one that's on my bedside table, which I've not yet got to.
Oh, okay, cool. Love it. I'm totally going to watch that program now. Next question. What is the best or most useful bit of advice that someone has given you in your life that you always find yourself coming back to?
So, I mean, anyone that knows me will laugh at this, but when I first was promoted into a group role at Kingfisher, so initially my role was very kind of UK focused, and then I was promoted into a role that was going to be working with all of the operating companies. Somebody said to me, a senior individual said to me, go and visit everybody, go and spend time with everybody, and have lunch. And he then said to me, it's so important, and us Brits are not as great at, we're a sort of sandwich at the desk often, if that sometimes. But in continental Europe, they stop and they go and have lunch, and it's a very social moment, and they enjoy lunch, then they come back to work. And he said it's absolutely invaluable for building relationships with colleagues, from our businesses. And so that's what I did. I'm very proud of my effort in that space. Actually, I did lots of lunch, but it's built great relationships.
And actually, I think it's something that potentially we don't do enough of in the UK. Is actually that having a conversation over some food or a drink or whatever, where you can have that more human conversation than you can when you're standing at somebody's desk. It just,
yes,
there's something about that. And yeah, you're right. A sandwich at your desk isn't going to do that relationship build.
Yeah, I think, and so there's obviously a social element to it, but it generally wasn't. There was a little bit about getting to know each other, but there was more about work and how we could work together and what the biggest challenges were. And the more you do that, the more you build a rapport and a relationship with people. I think my way of working has always been to build relationships.
Yeah.
I would go out of my way to build relationships with people that are that I work with, whether that be stakeholders or colleagues, because it's something I find enjoyable, because I want to get to know people, because I'm a people person. I want to get to know people and understand what their challenges are, how I can help them, how we can help each other. It's also often a vital source of information, and I don't, that comes with obviously a responsibility for discretion and confidentiality, of course, but from my perspective, that's always been a really important piece of advice that I was given.
It's a great bit of advice. Totally great bit of advice. The next one for me is, what's one super practical bit of advice from you to our listeners that you think is something that they could go and do now, do tomorrow, build as a habit, that you think would bring them a bit more work joy in their lives?
Oh, I think understanding the bits of your job that you love, that bring you more joy, versus the bits of your job that that you don't enjoy, is really important, and I know you talk a lot about that. It's very easy to sometimes think, well, I won't. Those things, I sort of do them under duress. I sort of have to do that thing. See if you can flip it round and find a way of doing it or a way of approaching it that would bring you more satisfaction and more joy in doing it, whether that's through helping a colleague to learn about something and maybe delegating that task or offloading that task, but in a way that makes somebody feel really empowered to do something different, or another element of their job. I think it's about how you think about things, and sometimes it's about the reframing of it.
Yeah. And as you know, I would totally agree with that statement, is that number one, to be able to get more work joy, you have to know what gives you joy in the first place. So you have to know what it is and to be able to build it. And number two is that our brains are always drawn to the negative. It's a survival mechanism. We're drawn to the things that aren't quite right. But if we can realign and reframe some of the things that we think don't bring us joy and think about, well, which bits of it are actually okay? Which bits of it do I actually enjoy? Which bits could somebody else do? And when you're thinking about that develop thing, delegating thing, I have a phrase that somebody, I cannot remember who I heard it from, and I'd really love to be able to credit them for it, but I can't remember who it was. But it's stuck in my mind, which is delegate to develop, not to offload. So if you're ever thinking of delegating something, it's how does this help that person develop themselves? How does it help with their career, etc.? And you'll probably find there are loads of things that you can do in that world if you think about it in that way, and you will actually build more joy just by knowing what brings you joy. It actually helps even just knowing it, because then you see opportunities for doing more of it, and you see the things that are maybe not in the joy space, but there's a bit of it that is, and you start to feel better about it. So
yeah, I would also say, if there's something you absolutely just have to do and it really doesn't bring you joy, just do it, get it over with.
Yeah, get it done.
I think in the past I've probably put that to the bottom of my to-do list, and then you eventually get to it and it's, I don't know, 5 o'clock in the evening, and you're just thinking, I just can't bring myself now. now's not the moment.
Yeah.
Then actually it's about doing that whilst, first thing in the morning, get it over with. Right, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to get myself a nice cup of coffee or some breakfast or whatever. Just get it done, and then the rest of your day is filled with things that bring you more joy.
Yeah, I'm the same. And then you spend weeks and weeks and weeks, and when you do it, it takes half an hour, and you're like, I should have just got on with that rather than having it on my to-do list for way too long. So thank you so much for coming on the WorkJoy Jam, Donna. It's been lovely speaking to you.
It's been my absolute pleasure to chat to you.
And where can people find out more about you or get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you and your work and what you do?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Donna Reeves. Feel free to message me through LinkedIn or connect.
Brilliant. We will put your link into the show notes so that people can click on straight through. Thanks again, Donna. It's been fantastic talking to you.
Thanks so much, Beth. Take care. Bye.
Well, a huge thank you to Donna for joining me on the WorkJoy Jam podcast. I think internal comms is one of those things that is really, really difficult to get right for everybody, because everyone has those different styles, different preferences, different ways of taking information, different ways of learning, and actually really getting to know your people, understanding what's going on the ground. I love that advice about actually going and walking the floors and understanding what's going on with people, having those conversations, building those wonderful relationships with people so that you know what works for them and you're able to consider what's the right message at the right time, what's the right channel. What do people need to go and seek out for themselves in a kind of on-demand version versus what do people need to know right now, today? And that difference between the kind of big corporate message, if that's where you're at, and the local engagement from a manager, how does that work for you? What are you doing? Wherever you are, I think if you have a role in leadership or management, you have an internal comms role. So what are you doing to make sure it's really purposeful, channeled in the right way? And it's a big thing, and it is quite complicated to get it right. But if you get it right, if you really invest in it, if you invest the time and energy, it's something that can make a massive difference to how your people feel. And if you can make a massive difference to how your people feel, bring them more joy, then the work is going to improve as a result of that. So totally worth the effort. Again, huge thank you to Donna for joining me. And remember, there are lots of different episodes. I think of it as like a pick and mix. Go and see the different people or the different subjects that inspire you on the WorkJoy Jam podcast. We also have a freebie, a giveaway, if you're looking at starting your adventure to getting more WorkJoy. It's called WorkJoy, Where Do You Get Yours? It's available to download on createworkjoy.com. So please do go and download that. Give it a go and see where you can get some more joy. Thanks so much for listening.